Hello, listeners, from Roy Damari Vinsan. In my ramblings this week, I'm going to change tack quite substantially and talk with a lady who specialises in taking care of people who are victims of leprosy. She once worked in Geneva and has returned to the UK, and she will tell us about the organisation she works for now. One of the first things she told me when I discovered her work, she forbade me to use the biblical word, I'll say it just once, lepers, because it carries such connotations. It's still the word in the Bible, but she now likes to call them, what do you call them exactly?
People affected by leprosy.
Well, it's a bit long, but okay, get on with that. So tell us about this work you do in Britain. And what's the name of the association or the organisation you work for?
Well, I work for the Leprosy Mission, and the part of the Leprosy Mission that I work for is the Leprosy Mission England and Wales. And we're part of a global fellowship. And we have 33 offices worldwide, and some of us are fundraising offices and some of us are implementing offices. And what we are seeking to do is to rid the world of leprosy.
How do you set about ridding the world of leprosy? It sounds like a major challenge since biblical times.
Well, it's clever of you to say that, Roy, because some diseases, some neglected tropical diseases, of which leprosy is one, they can be treated very effectively by mass drug administration. But leprosy is a little bit more complicated than that. But basically, top line, there's three things you really have to do to rid the world of leprosy. You have to stop the transmission of leprosy, and then you have to stop disabilities that are caused by leprosy, and also the terrible stigma. Leprosy is one of the most stigmatised diseases known to mankind.
And you can certainly see this in the biblical stories, how the lepers, as they were then called, were kept in ghettos outside town. We've heard of islands, was it Crete or something like that?
Yes,
it became a leprosy colony. Keep them away from the rest of the world. It must have been absolutely dreadful to be cursed with leprosy. Now, I'm not quite sure I've really introduced you properly. You're Katharine Harris, married actually to Mark Jones, but they keep their own surnames. That's fair enough. And Katharine lives in Norwich, works in Peterborough.
Yeah, that's right, where the Leprosy Mission England and Wales office is based.
Right, well, carry on, Katharine. Tell us, you've said already we've got to try and stop the leprosy from spreading.
Yes.
And the old way was to keep the victims apart from civilization. What's the approach now?
Well, in the 1980s, a cure for leprosy was found. And leprosy is caused by a bacteria, and it can be cured completely by the use of antibiotics. So what is called multi-drug therapy was developed then, and the numbers of people with leprosy diagnosed every year fell from about 5 million a year to around over 200,000 per year now. So great strides were made in ridding the world of leprosy, but leprosy still persists.
Where does it persist most?
Many of the countries that I'm going to mention wouldn't be a surprise, but India, Indonesia, Brazil, and then countries in Africa like Sudan, South Sudan, Ethiopia, Mozambique, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh.
Wow.
So some of the poorest countries in the world, in truth.
And their governments are incapable or unable to produce this series of vaccinations, I suppose, to kill off the bacteria?
Oh, well, it's actually, there's a couple of things there. Multi-drug therapy, as we call it, is donated by Novartis Foundation at no charge to patients. So that's a very good thing. So it's not a cost thing. But what happened was something rather complicated a few years ago. In 2000, the year 2000, leprosy was considered eliminated at a global level. Well, that sounds very exciting.
It does indeed.
But that was at a global level. On a national level, many countries eliminated leprosy by about 2005. That was not the case for a small number of countries, in fact about 22 countries worldwide, that the World Health Organization describes as global priority countries, where leprosy is still highly endemic or has highly endemic pockets. But what happened was countries scaled back on their leprosy services, and local community knowledge, healthcare knowledge, also started to be reduced. And so people affected by leprosy were not diagnosed effectively anymore. So some people... So one of the issues you have with leprosy is if you catch it in the earliest times, it can be completely cured and no disabilities develop. But if you don't diagnose leprosy until the disabilities start to show, which is quite often what happens, because if it can't be diagnosed easily, and I'll tell you how it can be diagnosed.
You better tell us, because it sounds a little bit like AIDS and stuff, that people have to be tested, and they won't be tested, will they?
Well, there's no straightforward diagnostic. There's no point-of-care diagnostic, although there are a number in development. So what it is usually, leprosy presents itself initially on the skin, as patches on the skin, perhaps numb, discoloured patches. And healthcare professionals can be trained to recognise those patches. But you can imagine if there was nobody in your community that had that knowledge, you might not think anything was wrong. And then several years later, the neural symptoms start to present themselves, and that's when you see these terrible clawed hands, and the characteristic lack of sensation in your hands and feet. So people damage their hands really, really easily. So you see the clawed hands. It can also affect people's eyesight. And people can go blind with leprosy.
Now, you're very heroic and deal directly with victims of leprosy. How do you protect yourself? Or what's the story there?
Very, very good question. So leprosy is not infectious at all. 95% of people are naturally immune. Only about 5% of any population is susceptible, and that is usually people whose immune systems are compromised, possibly through poor nutrition, perhaps they have intestinal worms, or what we call bad wash. They don't have clean water, they don't have good sanitation, and they may not know very much about personal hygiene.
But you spoke early on about leprosy spreading, and so I thought this highly contagious or infectious disease would put the leprosy workers in danger.
I know that occasionally somebody who works in the field can catch leprosy, but multi-drug therapy now would be very effective and would completely cure them. The situation you get is this. You get people who don't have any symptoms. Leprosy has a very long incubation period, up to 20 years. So some people might have leprosy and they are in their community and they are breathing, they are in contact with family members, that their friends and neighbours. And over time, living in close proximity in perhaps crowded conditions, that is when somebody can catch leprosy.
All right. Now, earlier on, you described the organisation you work for as the Leprosy Mission.
Yes.
Now, that sounds very Christian. Is it a Christian organisation?
Absolutely it is, yes. We follow the work of Jesus. We feel it's our very calling is to continue with what he was doing. He was healing people. I
have to tell you that, listeners, that Katharine is a very fine Christian in her own right, and a good singer, by the way, and that we have a delight to receive her in Holy Trinity Church, Geneva, quite often, but she does now live in Britain, in Norwich, as I mentioned earlier. So, what's the big message for all of us, if there is a message for all of us about leprosy?
I think that there's probably several. I think don't fear leprosy.
Don't fear it.
Don't stigmatise anybody with leprosy. It's a completely curable disease.
It's not something we're going to come across very often here.
Not in Europe. There's I think about 30 people were newly diagnosed with leprosy in Europe this year, and they last year, and they all were born in other countries. And I think the message I would have to governments, this is quite an important message, is to please use your overseas aid, your development aid, to help rid the world of leprosy. We still need to develop a diagnostic. We still need to we need to actively seek out people with leprosy and treat them, and then we need to map them. We need to know where the leprosy hotspots are. And we still need to, for example, help people affected by leprosy build up their lives again with livelihoods training, vocational training, and something else that won't surprise you, Roy, is that people affected by leprosy, a diagnosis of leprosy can be a devastation to somebody, because quite often they are completely ostracised from their community, separated from their children. In some countries, leprosy is grounds for divorce. So my message to governments is, please repeal those laws. Please invest in finally ridding the world of leprosy.
Okay, well, we'll try our little bit too, but it's really impressive to see you doing your big bit, Katharine, for this scourge of mankind. Although I just wondering to what extent, in competing for funds and for government attention, you have to compete with or against the AIDS issue and malaria, both of which I think have bigger numbers than leprosy have. But you're out there battling for that disease and doing it well.
Yes, I mean, I think the thing is, we are aware that there are over 3 million people worldwide who are just suffering from leprosy-affected disabilities. So although the numbers, for example, with malaria are high, they're high with leprosy too. And really, we believe there are millions that have not yet been diagnosed. So we're also working for those people too, and for the people who haven't yet got leprosy but might.
I can see you won't be losing your job for a long while yet.
Oh, thank you.
Well, that's a sad way to end, really, but there's lots of work to be done, and you're going to be doing it. Great stuff, Katharine. Listeners, we'll speak again next week on some other topic, a random topic if you like. But as I meet people who are as interesting as Katharine, the temptation of doing a talk with them to share with you is very great, and I hope you appreciate it too. So bye for now. Just say goodbye.
Oh, thanks very much for listening. Bye for now.